But to finish off our metal cabinets, we now have the Psp cabinet, which I can guarantee you has not a single PSP inside. But looking at the top of these cabinets here, you can see that some of my plastic console carrying cases used by places like Blockbuster and such back in the day are up there, but a lot of the other ones are actually underneath of the air hockey table. Now, I have done a complete kind of overview of every single plastic Blockbuster case that I own, so anyone who wants to see all about those should definitely check out that separate video, but there you go. And they're just kind of all stacked under there. I have a whole bunch of them. I think that those cases are just so cool. But with that said though, let us move inside the PSP case, which unfortunately does not get as much light as some of the other cases, because there's a few things stacked on top of there. It's really hard to like not stack things right to the front of these shelves, which would then stop a lot of the light coming through. But like if we look down here, you can see that you actually do get quite a bit of light entering the cabinets, which is pretty cool. And that's a really interesting view, I guess, of my metal cabinets. From one end to the other, you can see all sorts of interesting things there. But again, starting at the top here, we got a Coleco Telstar Pong console, followed by the ColecoVision console underneath it with Donkey Kong in there. Here we get the module, which plugs into your ColecoVision and allows you to play Atari 2600 games on it, which is pretty awesome. We got the complete in box ColecoVision different modules and stuff, like the steering wheel module. We have the Gemini, which also played Atari 2600 games. We have the rollerball controller. Everything back in the day seemed like they thought they needed to have a rollerball controller for whatever reason. Personally, I've never been too much a fan of them, but obviously they had their time in history, I guess. Moving down, we get the Intellivision complete in box, followed by a Tandyvision, I believe the Radio Shack, back there, Radio Shack variant of the Intellivision for whatever reason, followed by the smaller and more compact Intellivision 2, both a loose version and a complete in-box version. We get the IntelliVoice system, which adds voice to all of your, well, not rather, that's a complete lie, to some of your Intellivision games, the ones that are compatible with it. We also get a module for the Intellivision, which allows it to play Atari 2600 games, which is pretty funky, and it obviously has a look which matches the Intellivision 2. And we have a few other weird things like a Super Video Arcade, which is just kind of another Intellivision variant, and a Microvision Intiv 3, and a Merlin are hiding back there. So this is definitely like, the early 80s and before cabinet. And I really love this one. This is just a really cool cabinet, which really gives you a glimpse of a lot of things you're definitely not going to see out there these days. We even have like an Atari kind of video pinball system. Just a really plain kind of like telepong console. Now here we have the original Odyssey, early 1970s, one of the very first consoles ever, and known as one of the first to have kind of interchangeable cartridges. Even though I believe all the games are built in there, it's just a matter of like the cartridges change which circuits are followed, which causes the game to be a little bit different. And these are the massive honking controllers, and you spin these parts on the side. It's a very interesting and bizarre console, and certainly not something you see too often these days. And then looking back there, you got, again, a few more Pong consoles. Moving down, we got some more Pong stuff. We got a Lloyd's, this one with a really funky looking gun, back before they all had to be painted orange. And then beside that, we get a LeisureVision, which is a really bizarre console. Again, this one's not actually a Pong console. It actually has some different games for it, which is pretty neat. And some other Pong consoles, mini Atari 2600. And yeah. Moving down, we get another version of the Atari 7800 box. We get two boxed Vectrexes. And we get a Nintendo 64 steering wheel, Sega Genesis console in the box, and another one of the ColecoVision Pong consoles, along with a Merlin. And again, all these things need power cords, so just don't look at the bottom where they're all kind of strewn about, because it's really hard to make power cords look nice on the shelf. But with that, that is the entirety of my kind of metal cabinet collection, and hopefully that made some sense. I feel like these two didn't really take too long to talk about. But I feel like they were self-explanatory for the most part. There's only so much you can say about Pong consoles and, like, 20 different variants of the Atari 2600. But hopefully you think that's cool. And please feel free to let me know what you think about that down in the comments below. But putting those ancient game consoles aside, let's move to where the modern gaming area really kind of got its jump start when Nintendo brought gaming back from the dead in the mid to late 80s. Now, I've made an individual video about this cabinet in the not too distant past, but this is probably my favorite cabinet in my entire collection because it's all about Nintendo in the 80s, starting back in 1983 with the family computer, and then of course focusing a lot on their kind of jump to the North American market, as well as touching a lot on Game & Watches, which I've reviewed pretty much every single one of these individually on my channel at one point. Over 30 of them, just because I think they are that cool. So let us begin with the top of my World of Nintendo cabinet. We're going to find some boxed NES consoles, and there's of course a whole ton at the bottom as well. Again, another video I've made recently looks at all 10 different kind of boxed variations I own of the NES, which is pretty much all of them with the exception of, it was pointed out to me, a couple of like really obscure ones. But overall, if you want to understand what it looked like to buy an NES back in the day, that's definitely a video worth checking out. So you get the laser scope, that thing that you yell into to fire at the screen instead of using the zapper. You get the mini NES top loader, complete in the box. These are all sealed NES games. Of course, not something you're going to find too often these days. Unfortunately, nothing like super common here. Like, I'm sure, if you really wanted the complete sealed copy of Dragon Warrior, probably not too hard to get your hands on. A few other odds and ends up here. Like, here is my copy of the Game Action Replay, a really cool device for the NES that I've done a review on. Here's an extra copy I have of Action 52. And here is the Game & Watch for boxing, just because I would have loved to have kept all my Game & Watches on one single shelf, but unfortunately I just have too many of them, so sometimes they kind of get spread around a little bit. But if you want to talk about something pretty rare, this complete in-box copy of Gyromites, the big box Gyromites, is not something you're going to see too often, because normally when you got Rob, you would probably have bought the deluxe set back in the day, which came with Rob and Gyromites and the NES console and all the pieces needed to play Gyromite. So you wouldn't have got this big box version. The pieces and such would have just been kind of put in the styrofoam along with the console. But if you bought Rob separately, then when you bought Gyromite, in order to get all the pieces with it, you had to get a big boxed version like this. Now, most people kind of just got it with the deluxe set, so you're not going to find too many of the big boxed versions out there, but that's pretty rare, and I absolutely love having it as part of my collection. There's, of course, also Stack Up, the other Rob game, known as Block Set. The block set in Japan, and finding a North American one complete is very tough, so I just kind of picked up the Japanese one for like a fraction of the price, and it plays and works the exact same way. Moving on down though, again, I have over half of all Game & Watches released. There's just over 60 of them now, if you include like the new Super Mario Bros. 35th Anniversary Edition one. And yes, I have over 30 of them now. They are just such cool devices. So many different models: the wide screen, the panorama screen, the dual screen. There are just so many cool ones. And again, if you want to learn more about Game & Watches, definitely check out my series where I pretty much review every single one I own, because they are just a lot of fun. And I cannot describe every single one here in detail, because we would just be here all day, but that's why I guess I've already done a series that does that. And then moving down here, we even get my latest addition to my Game & Watch collection, which is this tabletop Mario Cement Factory Game & Watch, which again, I have now also done a review of. In the back there, we have a remote controller, and if anyone's been watching me for a while, you'll know we actually looked at the double player wireless head-to-head controller system, and those are just no fun at all to use. They're not very good on the NES, but we also get a complete in-box version of Arkanoid for the NES, which is pretty neat. It even has a plastic tray in there. When I bought this box, it didn't come with the plastic tray inside, and then I made a video about it, and someone actually pointed me to someone on eBay who was selling like original extra trays from back in the day that were just never used. So I was able to make that complete, and of course the reason it has to have a big box is it comes with this Arkanoid controller, so that you can kind of play it in a more traditional sense. Here we have a sealed box that came with 2 extra NES controllers back in the day. We have a couple extra Game & Watches, which again, did not fit on that shelf up there. Over here we have a really rare piece for the NES. If you had the top loader, the Game Genie would not fit into it because of the new kind of cartridge slot design. So you could contact the guys who made Game Genie and get them to send you this, which is just like a pass-through, so that then you could plug this into your NES and then plug the Game Genie up into here, so it didn't have to deal with the smaller cartridge slot. But of course, in order to get that, you would have to like call in, probably pay a shipping fee. So there's not too many of them out there, so to have that is pretty rare. Get the gray zapper complete in the box, and we get both my original NES that my parents owned before I was even born, and it's pretty much what introduced me to the world of video games and set me on my crazy collecting and gaming journey that I'm on today. And then on top of that, we have the European version of the NES, which actually says European version underneath the logo, which is pretty cool. And this right here is just something I keep in the cabinet. That is a version of Excitebike, which has the Famicom to NES converter inside, and I've done videos showing how you can spot those. So I always just kind of keep that copy there as to not mix it up with my other ones. Moving on down though, we get a whole bunch of kind of, memorabilia. We even get my EverDrive Nate right here. It's pretty cool. It's a great way to kind of, if you're traveling or something and you can't take all your games with you, it's a great way to kind of just, have them at your fingertips. We got the Super Mario Brothers telephone, and this is actually the green version. The only reason you could know that is because there's like a sticker on top which says such, but I reviewed that on my channel. I have a classic Nintendo pin set. Everyone's going crazy about Nintendo pin sets these days. I think Nintendo's giving out some more recent ones, but I love the classic ones too. They're very nice. Some, vintage Nintendo pins, an actual Nintendo-themed watch. It's not considered a Game & Watch, but, like, you could put it on your wrist and play, like, a, mini Mario game. Other cards and things, a sealed Aladdin deck enhancer, the Power Glove, and the NES Advantage. So let's move down now to the bottom kind of shelf before, of course, moving to like the very bottom. And here's where we get the Japanese stuff, like the Famicom keyboard, and of course the actual Famicom console itself. And this is what I was talking way back in terms of the SuperGrafx, and that is how it's not actually a box, just like a cardboard flap that sits on top, and that's what's unfortunately missing from my SuperGrafx box. But yeah, there it is, the kind of console that kicked video games back into the mainstream, along with a whole bunch of kind of disk system stuff hanging around here, like good old Mario 2 and Doki Doki Panic, and just, the original Zelda was, of course, originally a disk system release, which is pretty neat. You get your Famicom, and yeah, you kind of get the history of Mario here, like Mario 1, Mario 2, Mario 3, always kind of love that display there. And then moving to the right, just to finish off this area, we get the Famicom 3D system complete in the box, we get the AV Famicom complete in the box, and we get the Famicom Disk System complete in the box, along with the Japanese variant of the Arkanoid controller, which is blue and green, rather than just kind of being boring gray and black. And then once again, you get all of my NES kind of boxed consoles stored at the bottom down there, and I have done an in-depth review of all of those, so definitely check that video out if you're interested in hearing more about which boxed NES bundles I own. But with that, that is my first World of Nintendo cabinet. We'll be seeing a couple more of those once we enter the other room. So moving on from that, we're now heading into Super Nintendo territory. This shelf right here is where I keep all my Super NES games, and my collection is not nearly as expansive as my NES one. Of about the 700 Super Nintendo games that exist, I own about 300 of them. It was never the console I focused on nearly as much as NES. I just love the NES so much, but of course, the Super NES has amazing titles as well, like the Donkey Kong Country series. What else can I find here without taking too long? We got, of course, the amazing Mega Man X games. Mega Man had some awesome games on the Super Nintendo, and games I absolutely love include the Pocky and Rocky games. Now, I loved those before they skyrocketed in value, and actually picked both of them up back in the day, just because I really wanted to play them, and not because they were, like, extremely rare games, but these days, they're just one of those ones that, for whatever reason, have skyrocketed in price. But yes, that's my Super Nintendo collection. It's unfortunately not nearly as easy to kind of organize them nicely as it is with the NES games, I find. The end labels are just kind of, a lot more boring overall. But because of their awkward size and shape, they just do not line up on a shelf nearly as easily. So instead, I have to kind of stack them like this. And of course goes, you know, top to bottom, top to bottom, top to bottom, all the way across. But everything is still in alphabetical order. I guess we might as well move down to where at the very bottom here we get all sorts of random odds and ends, including like the Nintendo World Championships reproduction I've looked at before. Amiibo Festival is kind of shoved in the back corner where it belongs. And we get a whole bunch of loose Sega Genesis stuff, and my complete in-box Sega Genesis stuff is stored elsewhere. And thankfully, for Sega Genesis, a lot of it was in like plastic cases that people never threw out, so I have a pretty decent, you know, not sealed rather, but CIB Sega Genesis set, which I think is pretty cool. But let's now move around to the back of the shelf. But along the way, we're of course going to stop at this standee here for Mario Sports Mix, which has 2 Dreamcast boxes on top. And if we go all the way to the bottom, we will actually see the amazing fact that Mario Sports Mix for the Wii was released on February 7th, 2011. So over 10 years ago now. Just where has the time gone? But it's kind of squeezed back here. Hopefully we're able to film in this area okay. And on the back of this metal shelf, we get Sega Dreamcast stuff. Along the top row, Sega Dreamcast, an absolutely awesome console. I guess I'll start at the beginning and give you all a really nice, slow look at just what I have for it. Dreamcast is so much fun, but there is a lot of really like rare and obscure stuff for it these days. But I'm very happy with my collection. I think I have some cool games. And then of course the awkward blue cases are like the European releases. And then we get into the Japanese releases, which was like way more expansive than the North American releases ever were. And then we get some extra stuff at the end down there. Moving down to the second row, we get my modest Wii U collection. It's not huge, but then again, you know, it's not like there was that many releases for the Wii U either. Then following into my Japanese GameCube collection, there were some really cool Japanese exclusives out there. And then this is certainly not like my Switch collection or anything like that. This is just some extra Switch games I don't have with the rest of the ones that I have. Here are Action Max games, that VHS player console I was mentioning earlier. There's you know, pretty bizarre games for that. Here we have 3DO, some games that don't have big boxed cases, and then ones that are complete with their big boxes. Moving down from there, we get Super Famicom, and again, just like Super NES, there's not really any like super good way to organize these on the shelf, so they're just kind of standing up like that. But I tried to put some of the cooler ones out in front, like the Mega Man games, like, you know, Mega Man 7. If you want to play Mega Man 7, you can either pay like $200 for the English version, or you can just get a Super Famicom version with an adapter for like, you know, $20. That's probably the route you should go. Of course, you know, with games like Mother, where you have to read, I say it's worth the time investment into learning Japanese, but, you know, some people will probably disagree with that. Moving on, we get some PC stuff, some Atari stuff, Atari games on cassette tape, which is pretty cool. And then we move into some TurboGrafx and CD stuff, which is pretty cool. Let me make sure you get a good look at that. I'm kind of squished in here, so hopefully it's turning out okay. And so the CD stuff, as you can see, the super stuff, and then just kind of the ordinary things, and then a couple extra things up there like Newtopia. And at the very bottom down here, these are actually all big box Philips CDI games, because everyone just loves Philips CDI. Those all came with that massive lot I mentioned I bought back in the day, and there's other ones too, but these were all a part of that lot. And then we get some Texas Instruments stuff, and then just some other, you know, odds and ends and PC stuff down at the bottom. All right, I apologize. That was probably you know, the sloppiest section yet. It's just a bit of a tight fit back here. And hopefully everyone could understand that. Here's some plushies and some monitors, followed by some boxed odds and ends, boxed consoles here, PlayStation 2s, Wii U. Down here is like all of my Atari 2600 stuff. This goes like 4 rows back in terms of like, you know, stacked up Atari 2600 games. I have a few hundred of them. There were a lot of them out there and lots of kind of label variations and such. And you also get some Atari 7800, even a little bit of actually Atari Jaguar here as well. Like, get that, and I think there we go. That's what everyone wants to buy an Atari Jaguar for. Wolfenstein 3D. Heck yeah, Jaguar there, and just some other Atari games there. Here we have some Nintendo Power Overflow. These are like doubles and things I've picked up over the years. I'm definitely going to see my Nintendo Power collection soon. I actually just completed my 285 Nintendo Power issue set, but we'll be looking at that in the not too distant future. And of course up here we just got posters and things. There's the poster you got for pre-ordering the original Mario Maker. Hard to believe, it's already like 5 years old, almost 6 now. That's crazy. Where is the time going? Some more posters. A really nice case. Official Nintendo case that you can hang up Game Boy games on the wall. And that brings us to over here, where we have my computer desk. Look at my awesome modern computers, everybody. So we actually have 3 computers here. Thank you so much once again for checking out my videos. I really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, as it really helps my channel out. With that said, hope to see you next time.